America in the mid-1800s was a young, energetic nation, brimming with potential and promise. The country was expanding westward, fueled by dreams of opportunity and a pioneering spirit. Cities were growing, industries were developing, and the population was booming. It was a time of great optimism and ambition. But beneath its promise, a dangerous divide was growing, a deep and festering wound that threatened to tear the nation apart. The seeds of conflict had been sown long ago, and now they were beginning to sprout, casting a dark shadow over the land. The country was on the verge of tearing itself apart, a fracture so profound it threatened the very foundation of the republic. The ideals upon which the nation was founded were about to be tested in the most brutal way imaginable. Brother against brother, families divided by ideology and loyalty, torn apart by the impending conflict, neighbor against neighbor. Communities fractured, friendships dissolved, and trust eroded as the nation hurtled towards war. The unity of the United States was at stake, threatened by a conflict decades in the making, a slow-burning fuse that was about to ignite. The Founding Fathers had left one question unresolved, a Pandora's box that would unleash unimaginable consequences. Could a nation built on liberty also tolerate slavery? Could the ideals of freedom and equality coexist with the brutal reality of human bondage? This contradiction festered, poisoning the nation's ideals, corrupting its institutions, and ultimately leading it to the brink of self-destruction. People on both sides believed they were fighting for the soul of America, for its future, and for the very definition of what it meant to be an American. Debates turned to anger, and compromise failed. The political landscape became increasingly polarized, leaving little room for negotiation or understanding. The core question, was America a collection of sovereign states, or one indivisible nation? This fundamental question of national identity would be answered on the battlefield. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president, alarming the South. His election was seen as the final straw, the point of no return for those who believed their way of life was under threat. Southern states saw Lincoln as a threat to their way of life and began to secede. One by one, states declared their independence, forming a new nation based on the principles of states' rights and the preservation of slavery. The United States was breaking apart. The bonds of union, forged in revolution and enshrined in the Constitution, were snapping under the strain of decades of division. The stage was set for a conflict that would define the nation, a trial by fire that would test its resilience and determine its destiny. The world watched as America stood on the brink, its experiment in democracy hanging in the balance. The actors were in place. The armies were forming, the leaders were preparing, and the nation held its breath. The curtain rose on the most tragic and transformative chapter in American history, a chapter written in blood and sacrifice, a chapter that would forever alter the course of the nation. The storm had finally arrived. The nation would never be the same. The Civil War would reshape America, leaving an indelible mark on its landscape, its people, and its identity. In the mid-19th century, a stark contrast defined the American landscape. Two distinct Americas existed side by side, each developing along vastly different trajectories. These differences, seemingly irreconcilable, would ultimately lead to profound division and conflict. The North was rapidly industrializing, bustling with factories, a magnet for immigrants seeking new opportunities, and moving toward a future driven by commerce, technological innovation, and a burgeoning free labor economy. The South, in stark contrast, remained overwhelmingly agricultural, its wealth and social structure built on vast plantations, sprawling across the landscape, and tragically, on the forced labor of 4 million enslaved people. Slavery was not merely an economic institution, it was the very foundation upon which Southern society and its economy were built. The South fiercely championed states' rights, believing each state possessed the sovereign power to make its own laws and govern its own affairs, even if that meant perpetuating and protecting the institution of slavery. The North, on the other hand, increasingly embraced the idea of America as one unified nation, with a strong central government capable of ensuring common laws and shared prosperity. Most Northerners vehemently opposed the westward spread of slavery into new territories, seeing it as both a moral abomination and an economic threat to the free labor system. These two fundamentally different visions, states' rights championed by the South versus national unity advocated by the North, were becoming increasingly irreconcilable. The South harbored a deep-seated fear that the North, with its growing political and economic power, would eventually abolish slavery altogether and utterly destroy their cherished way of life, their social order, and their economic prosperity. The North, fueled by the ideals of the Enlightenment and the principles enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, saw slavery as fundamentally incompatible with core American ideals of liberty and equality. The collision between these two opposing forces, these two Americas, was becoming increasingly inevitable. And so, the seeds of a devastating war, a war that would test the very soul of the nation, had been irrevocably sown. When the first shots of war erupted at Fort Sumter in April of 1861, the nation was plunged into a conflict unlike any it had ever seen. The attack ignited long-simmering tensions, and the consequences would reshape the very fabric of American society. Initially, the North fought primarily to preserve the Union, to hold the fractured nation together. The abolition of slavery was not yet the central aim. President Lincoln's paramount goal at the outset was to keep the nation together, to prevent the permanent secession of the southern states. He walked a tightrope, balancing political realities with the moral weight of the slavery issue. But as the war dragged on, month after bloody month, the true nature of the conflict became increasingly clear. The reality of slavery's central role in the conflict became undeniable, impossible to ignore. Enslaved people were the backbone of the Southern economy, fueling the Confederate war effort through forced labor and agricultural production. Recognizing this, the North realized it had to strike at the very foundation of the Confederacy's power: slavery itself. The war's purpose began to shift, subtly at first, then with increasing momentum. The focus expanded from simply saving the Union to fighting for the freedom of millions of enslaved people. On January 1st, 1863, a pivotal moment arrived. President Lincoln, with the stroke of a pen, issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This landmark decree declared enslaved people in Confederate-held states to be forever free. The Emancipation Proclamation transformed the war into a moral crusade, a battle for human dignity and justice. It also had profound international implications, effectively preventing European powers from officially supporting the Confederacy. Inspired by the promise of freedom, African-American men eagerly joined the ranks of the Union Army. They fought bravely and with unwavering determination for their own liberation and the future of their people. Nearly 200,000 black soldiers and sailors served with distinction in the Union forces, making a crucial contribution to the war effort. They proved their courage on the battlefield, demonstrating their unwavering commitment to the cause of freedom and solidifying their claim to full citizenship. The war was now undeniably about a new birth of freedom, a chance to create a more just and equitable nation. The Union Army had transformed into an army of liberation, fighting not just to preserve the nation, but to expand its promise of liberty to all. The conflict's meaning had changed forever, leaving an indelible mark on the American soul. The Civil War was a brutal, sprawling conflict fought across the continent. Early on, the Confederacy often had the upper hand, led by brilliant generals like Robert E. Lee. Battles like Bull Run and the 7 Days shocked the North, but 1863 marked a turning point. At Gettysburg, Union forces repelled Lee's invasion in the war's bloodiest battle. Simultaneously, Grant's victory at Vicksburg gave the Union control of the Mississippi, splitting the Confederacy. These twin victories crippled the South. The Union's industrial might and manpower began to grind down Confederate resistance. Grant's relentless campaigns in the East and Sherman's destructive march to the sea broke the South's will to fight. The war became one of attrition, with the Union pressing its advantage. The Confederacy could not recover. The end was in sight. The war's fate rested in the hands of remarkable leaders. Abraham Lincoln's wisdom and resolve anchored the Union cause. His words, like the Gettysburg Address, inspired a nation. General Ulysses S. Grant, quiet but relentless, understood that victory required total commitment. He pressed the Union's advantages without hesitation. On the Confederate side, President Jefferson Davis struggled to unite a fractious new nation. General Robert E. Lee, a master tactician, inspired fierce loyalty and won improbable victories. Lee's choice to fight for Virginia over the Union haunted him, but he became the South's greatest symbol. These leaders shaped the war's course and the nation's destiny. Their decisions determined the fate of millions. The conflict tested their character and vision. Their legacies endure to this day. The Civil War's true story is found in the suffering and bravery of ordinary people. New weapons made the killing unprecedented, but tactics lagged behind, leading to horrific casualties. Battles like Antietam and Shiloh shocked the nation with their bloodshed. Soldiers endured hunger, disease, and relentless hardship. More died from illness than bullets. Women stepped up, running farms, working in factories, and nursing the wounded. Clara Barton, the angel of the battlefield, became a symbol of compassion. Over 620,000 soldiers died, more than in all other American wars combined. The South was left in ruins, its economy shattered. The war's cost was immense, its wounds deep. Yet acts of courage and sacrifice shone through the darkness. The nation paid a terrible price for unity and freedom. By spring 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing. Union blockades and relentless campaigns had exhausted Southern resources. Lee's army was starving and outnumbered, fighting with desperate courage. Grant's forces closed in, breaking through at Petersburg and forcing the fall of Richmond. Lincoln visited the captured Confederate capital, greeted by newly freed African Americans. Lee's final retreat ended at Appomattox Courthouse. Out of options, Lee surrendered to Grant on April 9, 1865. Grant's terms were generous. Confederate soldiers could return home in peace. The war was over. The nation faced the challenge of healing. The long, bloody conflict had ended. America stood at a crossroads. The Union's victory brought a revolution. 4 million enslaved people were freed. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery everywhere in the United States. The war settled the question. America was one nation, indivisible. Federal power was strengthened and secession was dead. Reconstruction brought hope and new rights, citizenship and voting for African Americans. For a brief moment, freedom and equality seemed within reach. But Lincoln's assassination shattered hopes for lasting change. Reconstruction faltered, and Jim Crow segregation rose in the South. The struggle for civil rights would continue for generations. The war ended slavery, but the fight for justice was far from over. America was reborn, but not yet redeemed. The Civil War's legacy shapes America to this day. Its questions, race, freedom, unity, still challenge us. The war drew the blueprint for modern America. The struggle for equality continues, echoing the unfinished work of the Civil War. The sacrifices made consecrated the idea of a perpetual union. When we pledge allegiance to one nation, we echo the war's verdict. The Civil War is a story of division and unity, of bondage and freedom. It reminds us that progress is born from struggle. Its lessons are as vital now as in 1865. Understanding the Civil War is essential to understanding America. Its story is our story, unfinished but ever moving forward.